Welcome, welcome everyone. My name is Caroline Colas. I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. And today on our Positive Psychology Hour, a series that we offer in partnership with Whole Being Institute, we are going to be talking about as we emerge the positive potential of incidental connection with Sharen Barboza. Interpersonal connection is a basic human need. And yet for months upon months, many of us have felt and been truly isolated. Distance has been a necessity for our health and the health of others. Yet from the moment of our birth, we are reliant upon individuals and our collective connections for our survival. Without an ability to connect to one another, we would die. Human connection is that intrinsic to who we are. It's built into the very fabric of our being, and we have been forced to put that connection, that priority of that connection on hold. However, as we emerge from our isolation, connections might feel strange. They might feel strained. We might not be used to being around one another. We're actually struggling to balance our need for social connection with our need for self-preservation. And our brains are working overtime to decipher social situations and understand the minds of others so we can connect with them. With the pandemic, we have felt strange interpersonal feelings, lots of them to untangle. And distance can feel like rejection, which is really important because when we feel rejection, that actually triggers certain neurochemicals in our brain. Even when we know that this rejection might not be true or real. Sharon's going to unpack that for us. And we too can shut down our awareness of opportunities for connection by not looking at faces, by avoiding human contact, and feeling like it's just too much right now. So Dr. Sharen Barboza will explore human connection today and its ability to enhance our wellness and our well-being. She's going to discuss the daily opportunities for sharing positive emotions with others and offer exercises and insights into how to expand our daily dose of positive micro moments. And we've heard about micro moments from lots of our speakers and from Barbara Fredrickson, but she's going to talk about it a little bit differently today. Dr. Sharen Barboza is a licensed clinical psychologist with a certificate in whole being positive psychology. She spent most of her career, believe it or not, behind bars, working for and with individuals who are incarcerated in jails and prisons. She's a monitor, a consultant, a trainer, as well as an internationally renowned award-winning speaker in the field of behavioral health and wellness with an expertise in behavioral change, trauma-informed care, and strategies for self-care. I welcome to the call Sharen, and I'm going to add you to the spotlight here. And thank you so much for being with us today. Oh my goodness.
Well, thank you for having me, Caroline. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to share and hear from other folks and just kind of connect, albeit virtually.
Yeah, tell us where you're calling in from.
Sure.
And, you know, how it is up there. Are people out? Are they masked, or how's it going?
Oh, interesting. Yep. So I live upstate New York. I live about 3.5 hours north of New York City. Kind of, it's, northwest, dead center New York. We call it Central New York, the Mohawk Valley. Yeah, we've been relatively safe up here. We haven't had huge outbreaks, and there's a mix, right? There's a mix of kind of how people are feeling about whether or not they need to protect themselves. So masks have been variable right along, right? There's both sides. There's people who believe that they have value and people who believe that they're an infringement on their rights. And so there's a bit of that up here. But it's, people lock down, and then now that the weather's nice, people are out more, and we have a lot of open space. And so that's nice where I am.
And then from upstate mid New York, how did you find positive psychology and the Whole Being Institute certificate in positive psychology?
I love it. So sure. So as you said, I've been doing work in prisons and jails for over 20 years, and that can really wear on one. And so I actually hooked up through Kripalu to kind of do some self-care. And while I was there, I met Maria Serwa, and took some courses with her. And then over time, got mailings and various other things, and thought I really need to move into something more formal. And so I joined the SIP certification and had a wonderful cohort. In fact, some are on today. Hi, Nick. Hi, Karen. And we've continued to be, this is back in 2019, and we've continued to stay connected. And be supports for one another over this time. So that's been great.
Yeah, I think people don't realize that you have like a pod when you go through the certificate in positive psychology. And I've talked to a lot of our presenters on the pregame show, as I like to call it, and they've said, "Oh, my pod's here." And how nice to think of traveling through life with a group of people that you've met from all over, right? That you never would have met, that somehow understand you and become part of your experience, sort of part of your helping move you forward and elevate you forward. I think it's an added benefit we don't talk about, but I've experienced that as well.
It's true. And I think, each of us transforms and changes in our own way as we go through SIP, right? And I think to do that together and kind of watch each other kind of shift and change, and then even post SIP, watching folks kind of shift and change and morph. And yet to do that together just feels really safe and supportive. So that's been just hugely valuable for me.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody that there is another cohort starting. SIP stands for Certificate in Positive Psychology. So if you wanted to sign up for that, I'll put a link in the chat. And we have a virtual giving circle. So part of the whole being gives back to the JCC if someone signs up and you use that code. And I just learned, my dear friend, some of you have met her. She's presented for us, Winnie Zeeb. She is joining the next SIP cohort. So if you're thinking about doing that, please consider signing up and using the link. Now, Sharen, we have a wonderful presentation. I've gotten a chance to see your slide deck. I'm so excited. Would you like to start us with, as we like to do in positive psychology, a mindful moment, and then we'll get started?
Absolutely. See, I have a mindfulness moment built into my slides. Is it okay if I do that, Caroline?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to actually share my screen so folks can see. And so I'm going to invite folks, if you would join me, to kind of sit yourself as comfortably as you can in your chair. As best you can, kind of situate yourself to feel grounded, straight spine, let your shoulders fall away from your ears. And before we move in, I invite folks, because I know this is the middle of the day for many of us on the East Coast. I also invite you, before we get started, before we were here, a bunch of things happened today. Let's take those things and set them aside. And there are a bunch of things that face us in the next hour. Let's also take those things and put them aside, so that we are giving to ourselves the next 54 minutes to simply be present here. Those things that are past will remain past, and those things that are going to come will come. We don't need to worry about either right this minute. So as you sit, hopefully comfortably, again, straight spine, kind of think about the crown of your head reaching up toward the sky, not strenuously, just easily. I want you to picture someone for whom you care very deeply. And I want you to place that person in your heart. And I want you to say to that person as you hold them in your heart, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free from suffering. May you live with ease. And now I invite you to imagine your heart opening as wide as it possibly can, and opening and opening and opening, and reaching across your neighborhood, across your town, across your city, across your county, your state, this country, the world, and have your heart open to every living thing, and say to every living thing, may all be happy. May all be healthy. May all be free from suffering. May all live with ease. And if you would take a big, deep breath in, and feel free to open your eyes and join back in. And I will leave this on the screen. This is actually a shot of the Erie Canal. So I live not far from there. So I thought I would share that with everyone today. So that's the Erie Canal. Okay, wonderful. So as Caroline sort of started us off talking and giving you an introduction, the need that we have for connecting with one another is kind of built into the very fabric of who we are. So if you think about, from the moment of birth, right? Children are adorable and yet make sounds that are unbearable so that we'll tend to them so that they can survive, right? As humans, we wouldn't survive without someone there to tend to our needs of food and shelter and safety. And so from the very moment that we're born, we're reliant on other people to care for us. And we learn over time kind of how to make the right sounds or make the right faces or do the right thing to get other people to care for us. And in psychology, we talk about this thing called the transaction, where it's not just one-sided. So the child is learning how to kind of negotiate the parents, and the parents are learning how to negotiate the child, and they kind of interact and transact and sort of change one another, again, to survive, to kind of get their needs, their mutual needs met over time. And if you think about kind of as we move into adolescence, how much time we spent in our adolescence worried about our social needs, right? Brene Brown talks to us about fitting in rather than belonging, and how much time we spent, and how for many adolescents, the idea of social rejection is intolerable and actually feels like they're like a death experience to have folks kind of reject you socially as a teen. And so we spend so much time with the need for connection there and the need for peer support. And then we don't lose that connection to our parents, and we stay sort of connected. And then as we move into adulthood, we think about all the relationships that we have and how necessary those are, whether it's connection to our kind of family of origin, or it's connection to our new partners that we form relationships with over time, our work colleagues, our friends, folks that we, go to religious experiences with, whatever the case may be. We kind of, we build those connections, and they're so necessary and a part of who we are. And they're just so foundational. And we've moved through this life with all of these connections. And we know from positive psychology and health psychology, connection with other human beings is so beneficial to us across the board. So founded in science, we know that that folks who have deep and high quality connections with other people, that those connections help to strengthen our immune system. They reduce overall inflammation in our body. The reverse is true also. If we're kind of stressed about our social relationships, that has been shown to kind of increase inflammation. Those with connection will recover from disease faster. We know that those with strong social connections have a reduction in their anxiety and levels of depression. It also gives us the ability to regulate our emotions easier, which is really a skill that we need to have, that ability to kind of feel a feeling and kind of modulate it and move it back and forth. And we know that folks with strong connections have a greater ability to do that over time. We also know that when we have connections, we feel better about ourselves, right? It increases our self-esteem to know that we have people in our lives that care about us and we care about them. It also increases our empathy, meaning that we are able to kind of see the needs of others. And I think, part of this COVID thing that's happened to all of us, where we all kind of retreated, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, we think about the political divides too, and how much less tolerant we are of difference in our society right now, and how much of that has kind of fed itself off of us being so disconnected from one another and not having those shared experiences to feel connected and to build empathy, right? We tend to care about people that we meet because we develop kind of a sense of who that person is. And so those connections help us to build that empathic power. We also know that from the Barbara Fredrickson's work that kind of positivity and health spiral with each other. So as one goes up, the other goes up. And we know that can happen over time. And so these are just some of the kind of benefits of mutual connection that we know about from positive psychology as well as health psychology. And then enter COVID. And I think for many of us, we were all scared. and rightfully so, right? We got scared, and we were told to stay in. We chose to stay in. We chose to protect. And we know from, from psychology, we have the hierarchy of needs, and safety is basic. If we're not safe, we can do very little else. And so safety needs kicked in over any other connectedness needs we might have. And so we kind of closed down. We did self-preservation, preservation of our families, and we stayed in. We had fewer social contacts than we normally would have with kind of pre-existing relationships, as well as what Caroline was talking about at the beginning, right? We're not riding the bus anymore. We're not at the grocery store. And so we're also losing those opportunities for new social connections. So not only are we not seeing old friends and family, we're also not making new friends or having new family join us for things. And so I think, we sort of closed down. And resulting from that, we're finding that folks experience lots of sense of isolation, obviously, that folks' feelings of loneliness went up. And one of the things that I know is true for me, and I'm interested to hear in the chat from other folks if you have the similar experience, there's this study out there that's fascinating to me. So Michael Lieberman has a new book called Social. And before I was a clinical psychologist, I was a social psychologist, and I did a lot of work around verbal and nonverbal communication. And one of the studies that he talks about in this book, which it resonates so strongly with me around COVID, is there's this experiment where they have basically, the original experiment is 3 people sitting in a doctor's waiting room. One of them is a subject, and the other 2 are involved in the study, right? They're confederates, we like to say in psychology. So what happens is someone just happens to find a tennis ball and throws the tennis ball to someone else who catches it. And the 3 people then begin to kind of throw the ball back and forth in some sort of, random pattern of inclusion. And over time, the 2 confederates start to just pass the ball between each other, and they don't include the subject anymore. And the feelings of rejection are real and painful. And the subjects will talk about kind of the poignancy of that rejection. And it's actually been subsequently found through MRI studies that the pain centers in the brain get lit up around being, no one's throwing a ball to you. So it's not even like a strong thing that's happened or a real relationship that's been kind of broken, but just an incidental sense of rejection. And it had me thinking about kind of COVID and how we all were doing that to each other, right? Everyone else became the potential carrier of scary stuff, of disease, of potential sickness. And so we started to turn away from one another, right? And shoulder away from, and we didn't touch people. And we, if I went to get on an elevator and someone was already on, I'd literally walk away and take the stairs, right? And so we were, for all intents and purposes, kind of rejecting each other socially for months, and being rejected. And I don't know how we didn't all kind of metabolize that in some sort of way that just felt really awful for all of us. And I don't know if other folks, if you want to share in the chat that that kind of had that experience. Did folks kind of feel that just pull away? Thanks, Nick, for like just folks just kind of pulling out and feeling really yucky, like separate from the isolation and loneliness. Just even the times when we were with other people just felt really kind of rejected. And so I think, one of the things that then happens is, now we're kind of coming back, right? So now we're being asked to re-enter. And what does that look like? Right? So we're kind of emerging from this isolated, disconnected space. And we didn't see anything but eyes, right? So we stopped seeing mouths. And I'm a huge smiler, and I come from a family of smilers. And so to not see people smile at you, right? So we all kind of did that weird, like, squeeby eye thing at each other and hoped that there was a smile under there. But we can't even use what we would normally use as a social cue from other people. So I can't even look at you and know how you're responding to me, because the normal indications that I would get from your face are missing. And so that's happening. There are also new rules, right? We're elbow touching. We're not hugging people, right? Somebody said that, like not being able to hug another person. How we stand in line. And even as, over time, the rules are kind of softening. I don't know about the rest of you, but, I'm standing in line at a store and, a gas station or something. And if the person behind me is a little too close, I get a little bristly, right? Because the rules have changed. We've adopted more personal space. I'm still afraid, right? That now that if someone's wearing a mask, what does that say, right? Someone's wearing a mask, are they not vaccinated? Do I need to be more afraid of them? And so there's still some of that kind of leftover residual fear of getting sick from other people. We all have different thresholds. We all are willing to take risks at different levels, and that's been true right across. But now especially, kind of what's comfortable for me might not be comfortable for my partner. What's comfortable for me may not be comfortable for a friend. And so we're talking about going to dinner, but they only want to go if we can sit outside, right? And so we're all kind of negotiating that. And does that bring up those feelings of rejection again? I think we all have become more irritable in the past year too. And so we have a little bit less patience than we would have normally to kind of deal with those differences and infringements and personal space stuff. And we're all a little more edgy than usual. And our priorities have shifted. What's important to me today may not be what's important to me 2 years ago, right? I do want to spend more time with my family. I do want to be more attentive to my own care needs. I'm saying no to things that in the past, maybe I would have felt some social pressure to be a part of things that I now kind of feel more entitled to say, I'm not comfortable doing that yet, or I'm not comfortable doing that ever. And so I think that's also changed our relationships with other people because their thresholds are different and what their priorities are have shifted and all of that stuff. Hopefully, what I'm saying is kind of hitting folks. Are folks finding other challenges kind of as they emerge? Are other things coming up for you as you kind of re-enter the space of social? Are there things that you're noticing?
Yeah, we have some comments in the chat. I feel we are emerging with health consequences, inflammation, autoimmune issues, pain that we may not even tie to the lockdown, but the isolation could be a factor. Never thought of it this way. There's some judgments in the elevator, for example. I see it through a different frame that by not getting in the elevator and taking the stairs was not a rejection, instead an act for the greater good to the health of society, right? So, and Karen said it hurt most not to be able to hug my family or even see them for a long time. And Nick said, I felt like I couldn't even spend time with my neighbors.
Right.
And
right.
Sarah said, yes. And now when strangers get too close, I get a little nervous.
It's true. And I think, even the person who's like, it feels like an act of good, right? To kind of keep your social distance. That's absolutely true. And yet I think it can feel like rejection on the receiving end of it, even though my intention is to keep you safe, right? Same thing with kind of, I'm not hugging, I'm doing elbow bumps, whatever the case may be. It's that weird kind of renegotiation of how we are together in space.
Yeah, Nancy said, and I hate that I am nervous. And Elizabeth said, and I hate, Elizabeth said, it's very conflicting. Isolation has really taken its toll. And Gail says, yes, lots of decisions in uncertain circumstances.
Right, like our brains are working overtime because all of the rules are out the window, and we have to kind of like redo the math in social situations that used to be familiar and used to be no-brainer. Are now we feel like we have to like overthink everything. So yeah, absolutely.
Carla says decision fatigue, and Ellen says look at unvaccinated with judgments, right?
Yes.
And Nick was saying there's a lot of anger and fear living in Florida too.
Absolutely. No, there's no doubt about it. So thank you for saying that. And I think someone said I feel alone in the chat as well. And I want to remind that just by this right here, we are not alone. And Dr. Neff tells us when we talk about self-compassion, that part of being compassionate to the self is recognizing kind of we're all in this together and we all have it. And so I think as we are kind of negotiating this sense of isolation and feeling alone and feeling uncertain and feeling like we have to redo all the math in our heads about who we talk to and how we talk to them, we're all doing it, right? I think that's the other part that's so valuable to hold on to is everyone is awkward and uneasy. Everyone is renegotiating. And so it's not just you, it's all of us. That we're all back out there and trying to make sense of kind of how that works. And so keep that in mind as we kind of move to the rest of talking about what can be positive about reconnecting. Just remembering that this is bigger than all of us and we are all going through the same and literally everyone right across the globe has been touched by this. And so everyone is kind of going through the same thing right now. Then remembering that can be really helpful. So as this is our positive psychology hour, I want to talk about the ways that positive psychology has kind of taught us there are things we can do as we kind of navigate this collective comeback, as we all kind of rejoin. And so we know that positive emotions and positive processes, positive conditions and positive relationships, so just all of those kind of collectively do three really important things for us. One, they can buffer the effects of negativity. So we can kind of stave off things when we have positive emotions, conditions, relationships, et cetera. So we know that kind of having those positive things buffers the effect of negativity. So if we had decent relationships and a relatively positive outlook kind of going in to the COVID crisis and kind of coming out of it, that may buffer and help to protect us as we move forward. We also know that when we can focus on those things, when we can say, these are the positive things in my life, and kind of shift our focus onto those things, that it helps, as Barbara Fredrickson tells us, to kind of maintain and build on itself to maintain a positive outlook. And so it not only protects us against, but kind of helps us to elevate the good in our lives. And then the third, which I think we're going to focus mostly on for the rest of our time together today, is how to then take all of the good in our lives and apply those in a way that makes for new practices, that we can kind of shift just a bit and take one step closer to bringing more positive emotions, positive relationships, positive connections and conditions into our lives to kind of move forward in a way that helps support our kind of overall sense of well-being, as well as just a sense of hope, I think. So just some of the research out there tells us, so we know that positivity resonance, which is that interactive, when I'm with someone else and they are with me, and in that moment, however small, by the way, it does not have to be a long-term relationship or someone that you've known for a long time. It can be an instant contact. If there's shared positivity, a sense of mutual care and concern, and this kind of synchronicity of who we are in the space together, that's considered positivity resonance, that we're kind of sharing, right? Kind of a sound space thing, built in with our own sense of resilience, that those two things have come together and really have shown to have positive mental health outcomes. And this one study says even around COVID crisis. So that having those moments of positive resonance and it blended with your own internal resilience really can bring to the fore a positive sense of your own mental health. So keeping that in mind. We also know that connection and positive emotion build off each other. So when I have a sense of feeling connected with others, that makes me feel better. I have better emotions. When I have better and more positive emotions, I want to connect more. And so I have more connections, which make me feel better, which get me more connections. And we know that those kind of blend off each other. So keeping that in mind too, that when we can step and emerge from our isolation and even from our fear a bit with a little bit of bravery and a little bit of hope about connection, and we do make those connections, we're going to bolster our mood, which in turn will bolster our ability to connect, and those two will just continue to play off each other. So keeping that in mind is also enormously important. We know that when we have positive emotion, it literally opens us up. So there's been research that it actually expands your peripheral vision. We know on the kind of classic psychology side of things, not positive psychology, but the kind of the study of dysfunction and symptom, that folks who are depressed actually narrow, that they become a little bit tunnel vision. They only see the bad and the worst in the world, and they have a really hard time kind of seeing beyond that. Well, positive does the opposite and actually allows us to see lots of things. And so as a result of that, It improves our ability to attend, so we can actually see more of our world around us. It opens us up to being kind of open to experience and seeing things in our environment that we may not otherwise. It also figuratively kind of opens up our problem solving skills, right? If you can imagine that if I'm able to see more, if I'm able to take a broader perspective, I then am able to increase my problem solving because I'm going to see things that I hadn't seen before as potential kind of ways out of this. And also positivity changes that sense of kind of me, that self-protected, isolated me, to a collective sense of we. That when I am experiencing positivity, I am more open to being a part of a larger group. So keeping those things in mind too, that when we can harness more positive moments in our day, which we're going to talk about in just a bit, we really are making these improvements, not only in kind of how we feel inside, but our ability to kind of be open to the world around us. And Carolyn, I'm seeing that there are things that folks are typing.
Yeah, so some responses. The Journal of Positive Psychology 2020, Prinzing, Fredrickson, Staying in Sync with Others During COVID-19, Positivity, Resonance, Resilience, and Mental Health is something that Phoebe was referring to. And Patricia says, I have struggled with agoraphobia. Zoom has provided a safe container for me. I am more social now than ever before. Donna says, I've been enjoying getting together in small groups with old friends and my husband. We're all vaccinated. Marvin says, the feeling of connection between people is one of the great benefits of connecting with others. It can be for a moment or whatever those moments extend to. Nick says, my husband is the same way, Sue. And Sue says, I have actually enjoyed the peace and quiet of being alone, and I'm kind of gearing up to go back in public. And then Laura was saying, I want to go to the gym, but I don't want to stand near anyone. I want to move away. And I always wear a mask, though. I'm fully vaccinated, but I don't care what anyone else thinks. And that's a big shift for me.
Right, absolutely, right? So it's interesting, a few of you are raising that kind of shifting priorities thing, right? I maybe used to be concerned about what people think of me, I am not anymore, or I'm actually discovering I like kind of my alone time, and maybe I didn't give myself the freedom to be alone before, and so I'm able to make a different choice. So wonderful, I'm so glad. Yep, I think kind of both good and bad have come from this shift, right? Some of us feel more empowered and more brave to kind of be our authentic selves because we don't feel like we need to apologize. And it's really kind of shifted and changed how we are in the world. Oh, that's so great. Thank you all for sharing. That's really important. And I think it's also, I just want to recognize, it's so valuable to do some kind of self-reflecting and giving yourself the kudos to say, wow, I really am aware of who I am. And in that awareness, I can have some sense of kind of self-efficacy, right? I can make my own decisions, and maybe some pride to say, I feel good about myself and the choices that I'm making. So kudos to everyone for taking that time to kind of recognize what you're going through and how it's a struggle and yet also positive. So you know, I think that we can talk about relationships in a host of ways. And for many of us, especially those of us who maybe live with folks that we are related to in one way or another, those relationships have been kind of both good, that positively and negatively affected by being together so much. And I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time kind of talking about pre-existing relationships because that's a lot of work and fraught with kind of, you know, I need to do this and how I communicate and all of those things. And I thought one of the kind of simplest, easiest ways to talk about kind of moving forward are those incidental connections. And when I was in the Certificate for Positive Psychology course, we have to come up with what are called final projects. And the final projects or kind of our future projects, kind of lifelong plans. And mine has always been, my focus has always been on bringing the good that we know from science and psychology to everyone, that it can't be just only protected and available to those people who can go to Kripalu, or those people who have internet connection and can join us, or those people who have the time in their day to sit together for an hour, right? We're all enormously lucky to have a Tuesday afternoon to spend together like this. And that's not true of everyone. And so it's really been important to me to think about bringing positive psychology to absolutely everyone so that everyone can benefit from it. And so as I was thinking about kind of what we could talk about today, I was thinking in simplest form, right? In its simplest micro moment form, which I will talk about in just a minute, we can bring positivity and connection to every human interaction. And so let's talk about that, right? Let's not talk about crazy complicated things. Let's talk about really simple, easy things. So I'm talking about everyday moments, everyday moments. And so we know from positive psychology, by the way, that we have these opportunities for connection all the time. And Barbara Fredrickson has called them micro moments. So those tiny little, the person who holds the door for you as you're walking into a store and they're walking out, the clerk at the checkout counter, the person you pass on the street, the person in the elevator with you, the person who also decided to take the stairs, whoever it might be, we have unlimited access to these micro moments. And we can, in those moments, share a positive experience. So back to that positivity resonance, we can find those opportunities to share a positive moment with another person. And in doing so, open ourselves up to more positivity and also invite that other person to be more open to positivity and just create more of that in our world as well as the world of others. So just to kind of think about all of those micro moments as opportunities really for positivity and happiness building. So if you would just kind of close your eyes for a minute. So it's Tuesday where I am, it is 12:39, so 12:40 in the afternoon. Wherever you are in the country, just think about what time it is where you are. And think back over the past 24 hours. And in the past 24 hours, sort of since you woke up on Monday, I guess, where have you been and who have you seen? How many other living human beings have you passed by, been around, even Zoomed with? And I just want you to think about those things for a minute, because I think that, you know, there's this thing in psychology and in neuropsychology that we talk about that's called habituation. And basically it's the idea of if you are currently wearing a watch, or you have eyeglasses on your face, or even the clothes on your body, we forget to feel those things. Literally, what happens is the neuro, when you first put on your watch in the morning, or you first put your glasses on your face, you first put your shirt on, that your skin will register the contact with those things. And it kind of tells your body, like, glasses on face. But over time, what happens is those neurons continue to fire and they habituate to the firing, meaning that they become less sensitive to the point that we stop feeling. So for many of us, if I just said you have a watch on, you may then have just remembered and felt the watch on your wrist or felt the eyeglasses on your nose. And I think for many of us kind of who are out, and especially those of us who live in big cities or kind of largely populated areas or even buildings with other people in them, those incidental contacts, we almost become kind of immune to them, and I don't want to say callous because that makes it sound like it's negative, but we almost stop seeing all of the people. So I just invite you to kind of open yourself up in this moment and say, you know, where have I been in the past 24 hours and how many opportunities might I have had for micro moments? So now that you've done that, I want you to think about, as you move forward from this point on, I like acronyms, they help me to remember things. And so what I'm suggesting is that we all think about having an ace in our pocket, right? I'm thinking like if you played cards and you just kind of snuck a little ace in your pocket. So have aces in your pocket. And what I mean by aces, and I'm going to go through each of these, is to be aware, to commit, to engage, and then to savor. And I'm going to talk about what that means as we move through the rest. So when I'm talking about aware, as you step into a situation that has even one other person in it, it doesn't have to be a crowd, it doesn't have to be, it's just you're in a space with someone that you may not know, an incidental meeting. Take a nice deep breath, ground yourself, and just simply become aware, I am in a space with another person. That's all. And while you're kind of recognizing the other person, also remind yourself, as lots of the work around compassion tells us, this other person is just as vulnerable, is working through just as many kind of social decisions as I am, and wants to be happy exactly like I do. And so this other person is likely to bring with them lots of similar things that I have to myself, right? This other person also just wants to be happy. And so recognizing in the moment, I am in a space with another or many another's who all want what I want from this life and are all kind of negotiating and traveling in time of this weird kind of COVID reemergence thing. That's all. So step number one, aware of yourself in space, as well as kind of being collectively with a group of people who feel similarly, or one other person who feels similar. So that's step one. That's the A for aware. And then the C is to commit. To say to yourself, I am making a commitment in this moment to have a shared moment with at least one person in this space. So that's it. I'm going to be aware that I'm in this space. And now that I'm in this space, I'm going to commit myself to one act of connection. And the E is to engage. And I just mean go for it. And I'm going to actually go through what each of these things tells us, or what each of these things can do for us from positive psychology. But it can be as simple as making eye contact, sharing a smile or a laugh with a stranger, right? You do something silly, you drop something, laughing with someone else about it, speaking a kind word to someone, or doing something kind for someone else, expressing, and I'm saying genuine gratitude. So if you're in the habit of saying thank you to the person who holds the door for you, or thank you to the person who is kind of checking you out at the store or wherever you are, mean it when you say it. Commit to meaning it and engaging and being truly grateful to this person for taking their time in their day to do something for you. And then for those of you who are familiar with character strengths, we know that there are kind of these 24 strengths that we each have. And some of them are kind of reliant on social interaction, right? One of the strengths, for example, is kindness. One of them is fairness. And so we need other people to kind of elevate that strength. And so kind of using maybe moments to elevate strengths that we've chosen. So I'm going to go through each of those. So we know, for example, from research that sharing laughter, when we laugh with someone else, it increases our sense of connection with that other person. But interestingly, it also helps us to feel similar to that other person. So again, if we're kind of feeling disconnected from others and we're emerging from this place where I feel kind of alone and isolated and not connected, sharing a laugh can not only connect, but also makes me feel like I'm like this person and they are like me, which helps to form bonds. So sharing laughter, very, very, very wonderful way to have a micro moment if and when it's possible. And I think kind of by extension, a smile can do us some pretty good as well. We know that doing good for others, so engaging in acts of kindness, research tells us it not only makes us happier, but has those health boosts, that it actually does some good things for our health and our immune system. So when we do acts of kindness, and again, they don't have to be major things. It can be helping someone reach something off a high shelf. We were talking at the beginning. I'm 5 feet tall. I'm often at a store and that thing on the top shelf is just never my friend. And so asking someone if they can give me some help and grab that high thing. And I love when someone walks up and says, can I help you get that? Right. So kind of doing good for others really does build our sense of being happier and healthier. So keeping that in mind.
Yeah, and I just wanted to let you know that we have some comments in the chat. What if this reciprocity does not exist? What does one do? And then Dina was saying, I think that if you feel positive about the interaction, that's what you can expect. Reciprocity doesn't need to happen, but it probably will. And then Patricia was saying, my experience getting back out there these past few weeks is that people have forgotten how to treat others. Like in the grocery store, they feel instead that of being considerate, allowing me to pass in the aisle, etc., they can just say, excuse me or sorry, and that condones their inconsiderate actions of cutting me off. And then Phoebe was talking about positivity resonance equal Fredrickson's shared positive effect, mutual care and concern, plus behavioral biological synchronicity or synchrony, right? And then Irene says, from my experience, not always, and not with everyone with whom I anticipate this reciprocity. And Marvin was saying, make a commitment or ask a simple question about something you have in common. The situation or the event is often a way to connect.
So many things. Yes, thank you for sharing all of that. So a couple of things. So one is, I think, to remember that everyone is navigating and kind of reemerging, right? Like I said before, not everyone is going to be entering the space after having come to a positivity talk, right? So we have to expect that for lots of people, their heads are still down, they're still closed off, they are still kind of plowing through the world. And I think that you're right, that for lots of folks, they've just simply kind of forgotten or intentionally are choosing not to do those niceties anymore. And so, yes, so not every person will be receptive to our kind of putting it out there. But I will tell you this, interestingly, there is a study about interacting with strangers. And they did this study about people being on a subway train, basically. And they asked people to predict what they thought it would be like if they engaged with the person around them. And what they found was that most people actually tended to predict more negativity than occurred. So I think that is also self-protective, right back to what we were talking about before around rejection, that for many of us, we don't want to feel that rejection, right? I don't want to put out kind of an olive branch, or I don't want to extend myself and be nice only to have someone kind of crap on me, right? That doesn't feel good. And so we want to protect ourselves from those negative kind of interactions with other people. And so it's natural for us to not want to kind of extend ourselves for fear of being rejected because it feels so crappy, right? To have other people do that to us. But what this study found was that people were actually more likely to have positive things happen when they reached out. Not always, not universally, right? There are always going to be those times, but that we tend to, as humans, I think in a self-protective way, kind of expect the worst. And it actually happens less than we think it will. So just to kind of keep that in mind, but I'm with you. There's absolutely real life experience of people being jerks out there. And I think, in those moments for me anyway, I just like to remember kind of two things. And the first for me is always, this person is doing the best that they can. Right. I mean, I work in my kind of work life. I spend a lot of time with people who've done awful things to other human beings. And I think, at the core of almost all of us, we want the best. We really do. And we're trying really hard. And some of us may get on the wrong path for that, or we might not necessarily know what best looks like or how to get there. And so in those moments when other people are rude or push you out of the way or reject your smile, those moments I just try to think like they're having kind of a bad day and they're doing the best they can right this minute. And maybe the best they can is to push us out of the way today. That might be the best they can bring. And so that's always really kind of helpful to me. And then the second piece is to remember that, for me anyway, it helps me to remember, like, we're all the star of our own movie. And we actually think very little about other people. And we have to sometimes be intentional as we move through the world, especially when we have an agenda in our heads and many of us like to get things done in this really efficient way. We tend to kind of plow through life and get from where I need to be A to I need to be B, and kind of everyone else, be damned. And so I think remembering that too, that for lots of people, they didn't even see you. And not that condones their crappiness. It just is a reality for many of us. And so kind of keeping that in mind too. So both things. So one is, other people or everyone is self-involved more than we'd like to be. And secondly, everyone's doing the best that they can. But I think, in those moments when we can kind of reach out. And as I said, this next one I have, talking to strangers, they did a study of two things. So the thing I was telling you about being on the train, that was a study where they just found that people's expectations were different. But they actually did a study about engaging with your barista, right? If you're a coffee person and you go to a coffee shop and you are actually, they tasked people with A, being as efficient as possible, or B, kind of engaging with the person who made your coffee. And they found that there was genuine mood boost among those who weren't focused on efficiency, who were kind of focused on saying thank you and really engaging with the person. It actually boosted mood. And so keeping that in mind too, that maybe it's, if it's too much or the vibe feels a little bit too risky to maybe reach out to the jerk who just cut you off in line, you can always be kind to the person who is handing you your receipt, right? Those moments are almost kind of forced social chances for us to have these incidental contacts. And I think, like Caroline was saying at the beginning too, I think the other thing that happens for many of us is we can feel when someone else has that kind of pull with you, where somebody, I think, wrote in the chat, you catch someone's eyes and you just feel a connection. And so you can simply nod and smile and, smile behind your mask for those of you still wearing masks, and kind of, give people some sort of indication that I see you and I know that you see me, and let's make this a positive thing. It doesn't have to be huge. So keeping that in mind as well. And then, as I talked about before, the expressing gratitude piece, right? We know that gratitude is enormously rewarding, both for the person giving the gratitude, and as well as the person being thanked. It kind of works both ways. And so keeping that in mind too, as that it can create more positive feelings towards the other person, that it does strengthen our bond and connection with the person that we're thanking. And also there's been some work done that shows that actually the more grateful we are, it decreases our experience of depressive feelings. So keeping that in mind as well. And then I think I am getting, yep. And then the strengths. So on this slide, and I will share my slides so folks can take a look at them, but on this slide are some of the character strengths that we all have. And we know that when we kind of elevate a given strength, we increase our happiness. We actually feel better about ourselves. It helps to kind of strengthen our relationships and support more positive social networks. Our strengths can improve our physical and mental health, decrease our stress, and then improve our overall coping. So you can see, hopefully it's not too small, but you can see there are a number of strengths that require kind of other people to be around, right? Like love and kindness and social intelligence and gratitude, humor in some ways. And so kind of thinking in a moment, what is it that I want to bring to this? Is there a strength that maybe I'm feeling like I'm not tapping into as much as I'd like to, and I want to elevate that strength today? Or is there a strength that I feel really comfortable in? And so that's the one that I want to carry around today, because I'm not feeling so, risky. And so I'm going to rely on a strength that's familiar to me, and I'm going to engage that one. But again, that kind of ACEs thing. So I'm aware and I commit, and then I'm going to engage, and doing so mindfully is really helpful. And then the last kind of part of my ACEs is to savor. We know from Barbara Fredrickson's work that one of the most important parts about positivity is to remember it. We have these opportunities every day, all day, where wonderful things happen. We see the sun catch a leaf in a tree, and it's gorgeous. I actually spend a lot of time on airplanes. So this is a shot out a window. You can see the little kind of reflection in the window. I love a cloud from the sky. And so no matter the stress that I'm feeling, even if I'm on a plane and I'm scared and there's a lot of turbulence, I turn and look out the window. One of my strengths is the appreciation of beauty and excellence. And I tap into it a lot. I turn and look, and I savor that cloud. And so when you're doing this, when you're out in the world and you've engaged in these micro moments of positivity and it's worked out for you, or even you gave it a shot, right? You tried, and even if the recipient wasn't with you and you didn't have that kind of resonance, good for you. Good for you for giving it a shot. So just take a moment to say, good for me. Good for me for trying to inject positivity into this moment. And just take a breath and hold it and savor it. And we know from positive psychology, if the more we do that, over how many times we kind of savor a negative moment, which many of us are default to do, right? I'm going to pay attention to the things that don't go well for me. If we intentionally savor those positive moments more often than the negative ones, our happiness increases kind of exponentially and spirals upward. So keeping that in mind as well, that just when you can savor the moment that just went by that was good. And as I kind of close out, and I'll be happy to chat I wanted to just share with you some words from the Dalai Lama. And he tells us that we human beings are social beings. We come into the world as the result of others' actions. We survive here in dependence on others. And whether we like it or not, there is hardly a moment of our lives when we do not benefit from others' activities. For this reason, it is hardly surprising that most of our happiness arises in the context of our relationships with others. And so I want to thank each of you for sharing time today with all of us. And I have seen some wonderful things in the chat that have really helped me kind of think through my own challenges as I'm out there moving out. But I think more than anything, I just want you to kind of step away from this knowing, A, you're not alone. We're all in this weird place that we're trying to figure out. And B, throughout the day, you have these opportunities to connect with other people, however small, however momentary. And if we can take advantage of them, we can increase just those little moments of happiness in our day and kind of flip ourselves over to a place where there's just much more positivity. So that's what I have. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this has just been so helpful, and there's been so many words of appreciation in the chat. Thank you for being here. Deirdre was saying, not strangers. I'm experienced for first time, and sometimes they use endearing terms like auntie, sis, my brother, dear one, and how that has impacted her, and Marvin has shared some wonderful thoughts about others who reject or starting a conversation is really about them. It's not about us, and it's unfortunate for them, and it leaves us to connect with the multitude of other people who want to connect. And it's really true. It's not everyone is going to want to connect to us, right? It's a choice.
And not everyone's there today, right? They might have, if you caught them tomorrow, they might be, but it also could be just a momentary inability for them to be open right this minute.
Right. And, they could have as permission to be human, permission to be brilliant. They could have something that, as you said, is going on, and which is compassion. I think that Thich Nhat Hanh said, compassion is born from the seeds of understanding. And so when we understand what somebody else is going through, it's like, oh, that's why you were a little short with me, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's really so important. I just thank you so much. I am fascinated with the time that you spend in prisons and with incarcerated individuals, and how this has impacted you. It sounds like you use it every day.
Have to. Right, because I think like all of us, right? No one's immune from it, but it's really easy to go dark, right? In dark places, it's really easy to go dark. And so you have to hold on to whatever that light might look like inside yourself. And so however you can do that in the moment, and having other people certainly is the easiest way for me to keep that little flame lit, is to have those connections and remember that behind every pair of eyes is another person just looking to do the same thing I am, which is to make it through this life in the best way we can, right? I mean, that's what's behind those eyes. So
that's beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that, and you are an inspiration to all of us. Everyone, if you, like Sharen, want to participate in the certificate for positive psychology, I put a link in the chat. Please consider that. That's a long program. Or just come back on Thursday to play with Jude Trader Wolf, who's going to be doing some improv with us, because play is an important part of positive psychology too. Thank you for spending your time with us. I'm going to remove the spotlight. I'm going to put us back on gallery view. And everyone, if you would like to unmute and thank our speaker for for what she does in the world, and also for spending time with
Sharen. Us. Thank you. Thank you.
So grateful for you all being here, for presenting this information.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharen.
Thank you so much.
As we go back in the world, be safe, be well, and keep coming. We'll see you on Thursday at noon for the Positive Psychology Hour, a program in partnership with Marlene Meyerson, JCC Manhattan, and Whole Being Institute. And don't forget, we have Jude Trader Wolf. And if you have not experienced Jude and her improv, you're in for a treat. Take care, everyone.
You as well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.